I love licensed games. They're such an intriguing genre of games, as they have so much potential to either be some of the best games you can play right now, or absolute dumpster fires. I think the deciding factor on whether or not a licensed game will work is if the development team can be creative enough with the IP they're given. If you're making a Spider-Man game, or a Batman game, well then you have an easy job when designing the gameplay. Just make them beat 'em ups. But if you're given an IP like The Nightmare Before Christmas, you have to take more creative risks, like making a Devil May Cry inspired hack and slash with musical segments during boss fights. But sometimes it's hard to work with a specific IP, so dev teams struggle. Maybe there's not enough material in the IP to make a game around. But if a dev team is really struggling, they can come to a realization. They go onto Google and search up what the most profitable yet easy to make game genre is, and they come to the conclusion of making a kart racer. Licensed kart racers are a dime a dozen. It's such an easy way to incorporate an IP into a game and hardly takes any effort. Of course, that doesn't mean developers don't put effort into some of these games, but majority of the time they don't.
I need a better engine.
But what happens when you make a kart racer with arguably one of the most iconic cartoon characters of all time? A character with such a rich and iconic legacy, being the star of multiple types of media, like comics, TV shows, movies, and even games already. You get Garfield Kart. Alright, so a bit of background about this game before I tear into it. Garfield Kart is a mascot kart racer in the same vein as Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, but it's nowhere near as good as those games. It was developed by Artifact Studios, who make such classic games as Moto Racer DS and Terraforming Mars, and was published by Microids, known for publishing the Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo game of all things. The game is more based on the Garfield show rather than the actual Garfield comic strips, couldn't you tell? The game was released in 2013 for PC, iOS, Android, and Nintendo 3DS. Yet this game was never ported to home consoles, which is such a weird decision. Usually licensed games try to port themselves to every platform imaginable, so it's surprising to see this on only very specific platforms. Well, time to get into the game itself. First off, this game looks rough. It's fine graphically, it's very basic and nothing really offensive, but the models and maps look like they could use some work. The tracks at first glance don't look bad. Hell, I'd say some of them look pretty good, like this one bit of a city track. But then you look at the factory track and it's just like the default Blender cube in the background. The character models are pretty bad though, mainly because none of them express emotions. I guess they didn't have the budget for facial animations, but it just makes it look like the characters look like people in mascot costumes rather than actual characters. Like, look at these podium animations. John isn't even blinking. On the topic of animations, every character uses the same animations for everything. Winning, getting hit, drifting, all the same. It makes it so it doesn't really matter what character you play as the only difference between them is their models and stats. The game overall looks like a wee shovelware game that you'd find for dirt cheap at Sex. Now I have two major gripes with this game that I want to talk about. Sure, everything in this game is terrible, but I want to talk about these two things first to get them out of the way. First, the controls. This is something I never understood about mascot kart racers. They take nearly everything that works in a game like Mario Kart, except the controls. Every single one, for some reason, uses a different control scheme, despite the fact that Mario Kart's control scheme works fine. My only guess why they do this is because of wanting to avoid being called copies, but like, you were never beating the Mario Kart copy allegations the moment this game was conceptualized. So, just what are the controls of Garfield Kart? I'll tell you. So to accelerate, you need to hold down the right trigger, which isn't too bad, but it's a pain on your index finger after a while. I don't know if this was just because of the controller I'm using being a bit sharper with its triggers, but after playing for like 20 minutes, my finger just starts hurting like hell from holding it down. We then move on to the drifting, where you hold A. This is fine, but the problem comes from how drifting works in the first place in this game. Instead of automatically going into a drift when you hold down the corresponding button, like in Mario Kart, you instead instead jump into the air and then go into a drift, which doesn't seem like that big a change on paper, but fucks with your timing of drift, and it's now you have to account for how long you'll be jumping for before drifting. For items, you press X to throw items forward and B to throw them back. Why does there need to be two different inputs for wanting to throw in a certain direction? Again, if you're going to copy Mario Kart, at least copy its control scheme. It's way smoother to just point the joystick up and down before throwing to determine its direction. The second thing that I don't really like about this game is how much of a chore it is to unlock new content. There's 4 major unlockables in Garfield Kart: characters, hats, carts, and engines, all of which affect your stats. To unlock characters, you need to finish Grand Prix and get in first place. The other 3 though, you need to unlock using the in-game currency. This sucks as a way of unlocking stuff, as it makes the game a monotonous grind just to get enough coins to unlock the stuff you want. It was one of the things I absolutely hated in CTR Nitro Fueled, how it would take you ages to unlock new content as you would replay the same tracks over and over again. It took me 75 hours on this game just to unlock all the characters, by the way. It's just such an artificial way of lengthening out your game for the sake of increasing playtime. But there is another way to unlock this stuff, through the daily challenges. Every day there will be a new challenge for you to do, and by completing it you will be given either a hat, cart, or engine. These challenges could be stuff like completing a race using a certain cart combination, winning against a CPU, etc. This is probably the fastest way of unlocking everything in the game if you don't want to find yourself in the monotonous grind of getting coins. What else? Oh yeah, the soundtrack is pretty shit. Just generic stock music that barely fits the tracks at times. Hell, during one of the tracks they just play the Garfield show theme, which sucks because it's actually one of the more interesting tracks in the game, being this gloomy port with shipping containers and a lighthouse. Best song is the one on the mountains because it uses the fucking Baldi's Basics sound thing. And that's pretty much it. The game released to poor reviews and now rots on the Steam store for €15. Artifact Studios never touched the Garfield IP again, and all was well. Is what I would be saying if they didn't make a sequel to Garfield Kart 6 years later. That's right, move aside It, Dune, Blade Runner, and the Garfield movies. The Garfield Kart duology is the greatest duology of all time! Okay, so Garfield Kart Furious Racing. What to say about this game? Well, for starters, this isn't really a proper sequel to the original. It's more of a remaster with some added features, like 4 new tracks. That's it. Garfield Kart is the exact same game as the last one, with better graphics. There's no difference, not even in the controls, the gameplay, the complete lack of emotions in the characters. They do blink this time though. All of it the same, except for those 4 tracks. And an online mode. Yeah, I couldn't find a lobby in this mode. Not that I'm actively looking to play Garfield Kart online in the first place. From what I can tell from the amount of Steam news forums that are still being posted to this day, there seems to be a decent enough online community for this game. I just can't find them. So that was the Garfield Kart games. 2 poor quality titles only made to make a quick buck off the ever so popular Garfield IP with as much care put into them as a morning shit. Safe to say, these games did meet my expectations with how terrible they are, but I can't help but not look at them with a hint of love. These are textbook examples of bad licensed games and how not to handle an IP, but there is a certain absurdness to their existence that just makes me love them. They're weird, but at the same time, almost endearing. It's kind of a shame these sorts of licensed games just don't come out that much anymore, simply due to how much more expensive it is to make games nowadays, with them needing big budgets and highly detailed graphics. Sure, these lead to great games, but sometimes I don't want to play a great game. Sometimes I want to play something terrible, and Garfield Kart is certainly something terrible.